Hello, this is Anna Laura Brown, host of the Autoimmune Rehab Podcast, where we talk about how to actually thrive and heal your autoimmune condition rather than just covering it up with pills or changing your diet and hoping you'll feel better one day. We feature solo episodes on helpful topics and interviews with guests who have actually walked in your shoes with autoimmune disorders and or who have years of experience in helping people to thrive and not just survive with autoimmune challenges. I'm a health coach who started this podcast because I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's in 2018 and wanted to inspire hope and transform health for people with autoimmune challenges. So keep listening and let's get you the help and hope you really need. This is the Autoimmune Rehab Podcast. Okay, and as today's title of the episode goes, as you can probably figure out, I am going to get really raw and personal with you today, and I am going to talk with you about my challenges with my knees the last they originally started probably more like 6 or 7 years ago, but they've been really severe challenges and pain and issues for about 2.5 years now, and sharing with you my experience in going to Mexico to get stem cells. So, what I'm going to be talking about today is, first of all, as a little bit of an outline, I'm going to talk about a little bit about the history with my knees, some of the things that have happened over the years, that what led me to being in the situation where I was having the knee damage, having the really chronic pain. Then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that I started doing about 2.5 years ago, including a surgery. Recap a little bit of my experience with PRP, which I actually did do a separate podcast episode on that, so I'm not going to go into huge detail on that. If you're really curious about what that is, you can find that episode separately. And some of the other things, as well as the decision, as far as like, why did I go to Mexico for stem cells instead of the US, what it cost me, what I feel like some of the results were, what my prognosis is long term, hopefully, and then also just a little bit of insights into how to decide whether or not stem cells are fit for you if you are in the situation where you're dealing with some chronic pain or chronic challenges around. In my case, it was the knees, but it could also be the hips, the back, other orthopedic related challenges. So let's get started first with talking about a little bit about the history of my knees. So I have had challenges and or some kind of knee pain, whether it was periodically, to some degree or some level, probably for, gosh, I would say probably about 8 years or so. So, knee pain was something that I had just kind of, for a while, it was kind of the status quo. I just learned to live with it. I didn't really think much about it. If I had the pain, I just kind of would, either put on an ice pack or a heat pack or rub some different kinds of pain creams or different essential oils to help relieve it. And for the most part, that pretty much worked. For a while, I didn't really have any real severe issues with my knees. And so, I just kept kind of going along. And there have been a couple times in my life when I had had a few accidents, like fallen on the sidewalk, tripped and fell, and, gotten banged up and probably hit my knees a little bit. But, there was nothing really major that I felt like could really happen to my knees. And so, I was kind of like, oh, I think my knees hurt a little bit here now and then. I think it's okay. And I, just kind of was going along with the status quo. And then all of a sudden in January of 2022, I had some really pretty major pain one day with a lot of swelling in the knees, but also some swelling on the side, especially on one of my legs. And it got so bad that I could hardly move and could hardly walk. And I called my mom to tell her about it, and I didn't really, know what to do. And she kind of freaked out and thought I might be having a blood clot issue and insisted on trying to take me first to the Instacare because that's a lot cheaper. But then Instacare happened to be closed by then because it was later at night and COVID was still kind of a thing. So they were not open their full extended hours. And so then I ended up going to the ER instead, which was a super expensive endeavor and a whole, another story for another day, really, about why on earth is the ER in the United States so expensive. But anyhow, they ended up determining after doing a blood draw and scan a few other things that I really didn't have a blood clot and they really didn't know what was actually going on. And so they sent me home and said, if it's still a problem, you'll need to probably go see an orthopedic or follow up with a general doctor or figure out what to do. And so I went home and they had given me some kind of, I think it was antibiotics or something, or pain something or whatever. And I don't really like to take that stuff, but I was in such a drastic state that I took it for a couple days, and then it just still really didn't get better. In fact, if anything, the swelling and pain in my knees specifically started to get even worse. And my mom has an orthopedic doctor and surgeon here in the Salt Lake area where I live that she had known for a long time, probably going on close to 30 years now. He had been the orthopedic for a lot of my brothers and sisters. He also happens to be an orthopedic who's very into holistic healing and stuff. He has been on the medical board in the past for the company doTERRA, which is a company that I sell their products and market and help, people learn how to use essential oils and other holistic solutions for and things like that. And so, I knew he was very holistic minded in addition to also performing surgeries and things like that. And after probably about a week and a half or so, it just really was not getting good. It was to the point I couldn't get down and then sit back up without help. I was having to start to use like canes and walkers because I couldn't move, and just on and on. It was just really becoming a major problem, and I wasn't being able to sleep at night. And a lot of the other solutions I'd used previously to help with my knee pain were no longer not working anymore. And so things were just really not going well when it came to a lot of my knees and my knee problems. And I just was, starting to freak out a little bit. And so I called my mom once, and this was actually, I think, even on a weekend. And my mom was like, "You got to call this orthopedic and you got to get an appointment because you got to get looked at." So I got an appointment that was about 4 days out, and I went into that appointment, and, of course, he does x-rays, and then he's, tapping around, moving him around, and having me try to walk for him a little bit. And it's just really, really bad. And so he comes back, he's going over the x-rays. My mom is there with me because my mom had driven me, partly because she's known him for a long time and kind of knew what to ask, but also because I just couldn't, I wasn't mobile enough to really take myself. So anyhow, we're sitting there in the office, and he's like, "Well, there are some other solutions and things that we could try, but I'm afraid those things might take a long time to help you recover. And you're in so much extreme pain that I really feel like it would benefit you if we do a surgery on both of your knees." And I go in and I'm able to, it's basically called an orthopedic scope, is the everyday layman's term for it. There's a more, technical term for it for people in orthopedics. But basically what they do is they go in and they cut you open on both knees, and they look around and they try to see what they can do to fix it, and they get a really good clear sense of what's going on in your knees. And I was just like, "Okay," and my mom was like, "Yeah, we just let's do it." So I get scheduled for knee surgery that was about a month out, and I leave the office a little bit in shock because I didn't realize I was going to be, or that I was in that kind of a severe situation, but apparently I really was. And so I end up, with this appointment for surgery. I go home, and I tell you, that was one of the longest months of my life, between really trying to constantly get relief. Fortunately, I was working from home still due to COVID, so I wasn't having to go into an office, because I don't know how I could have worked from an office at that point. My mom had to go help me with getting like a seat to sit in the shower, with getting bars in the bathroom. I mean, I had a special kind of toilet seat we had to install, all this stuff, because I literally couldn't even sit on the toilet and get up, or go stand up in a shower or anything, because I was having such severe issues. So fast forward to a month down the road almost, and I undergo this surgery, and I am in the waiting room, and I start waking up, and my mom starts, giving me some water and some of the different my doctor, because he's, like I said, he's really into essential oils, had a protocol of some essential oils that he wanted me to use right after surgery. So she started giving me some of those. And then, we just start talking a little bit. And then my mom starts mentioning to me that as soon as my orthopedic doctor and surgeon had come out of the surgery, that he had started already talking to my mom about the fact that I was probably going to need to do stem cells at some point, maybe, a couple of years down the road, because the damage to my knees and my cartilage was a lot worse than he thought it was going to be. And he said that if I didn't do that, I was eventually going to be in for knee replacements. And I was just in a state of shock. I didn't realize my knees were in that bad a shape. But, looking back now, I realize, the pain was a lot worse than I probably thought it was. And, there were definitely warning signs, and I had just kind of ignored a lot of those. And so if you're listening to this and you have knee problems, I would say, get checked out sooner rather than later. I know a lot of us maybe have a fear around that. We don't want to go to doctors. We don't want to be told that we have to have surgeries or that we have other things going on. And, if you're really not, do get suggested surgery and you're not really confident in that decision, you could always go get a second opinion. In this case, I feel like my mom had known this doctor long enough and we knew him enough that we had enough trust in him that we believed that that was the right decision at that point. But boy, I was just in shock. So anyhow, I go home, I start the surgery recovery. I go into his office for my follow-up visit about 10 days later to get the stitches out, all that kind of stuff. And he's talking to me, about stem cells, but also about PRP, which is a process by which they draw out your plasma and then they re-inject those plasma into like your knees or your back or hips or other places to help with the healing. And he starts saying, I think that we should do a round of that first. And probably within, maybe not immediately, but within about 6 to 8 weeks, so that that can help to continue the healing in your knees to help slow down the process of the damage to your cartilage, that kind of thing. Fortunately for me at this point, I was not yet what they call bone on bone, so I still had cartilage in my knees there. I mean, it was severely damaged, but I did still have some. And that's really key to knowing, the success rate even of something like stem cells eventually. So anyhow, I go and get this PRP 2 months later. It was one of the most painful things in my entire life. I actually covered that, like I mentioned, on a separate podcast episode in more detail, so you can go and find that. But anyhow, I took me a while to recover from the surgery, maybe even a little longer than I thought it would. But if you fast forward to about 6 months after the surgery and I've done the PRP and that kind of thing, things really started to go a lot better. The swelling was down a lot. I started being able to walk better. I start being able to feel like I can actually get back to the routine of doing exercises like swimming and stationary bike riding, walking my dog a lot farther distances, things like that to really help strengthen and improve the knees. But of course, things are not, totally better. When a lot of people see me walk, they can see that I'm still kind of, walking a little bit funny. I'm back working in an office at that point. A lot of my coworkers are noticing that things are still not, totally great, but I continue, to start to see some pain relief, some healing. I'm definitely sleeping better at night, that kind of thing. And at the PRP appointment, the doctor told me, if you continue doing the swimming, walking, things like that, you may be able to go up to 3 years without doing stem cells, but maybe even a little less than that. But stem cells are going to be a reality for you at some point. And this particular orthopedic has a whole team of people that he works with where they do stem cells there in his office in Draper, Utah. It's at Lone Peak Hospital, for those of you who may be familiar with it. And I'm not going to mention names or all the doctor specific information specifically on this podcast episode, but my contact information will be with it. And if you live in the area or or just even curious and want to know who it is, you can reach out to me and I can give it to you individually. But anyhow, he, in addition to that, this doctor had been going now for about 10 years down to a couple different places in Mexico and doing stem cells about 4 to 6 times a year. So in a lot of ways, I got really, really lucky because I had an orthopedic surgeon who had done my surgery, who knew my knees, that kind of thing, who had then also done my plasma injections, who also does stem cells and does them in his office here in the US and also in Mexico. So he's familiar with the different methods and different ways that stem cells can be done. And when we first started having this stem cell conversation, and this was in May of 2022 at my PRP appointment, or around that time, uh excuse me there. He had mentioned to me, well, you may really want to consider doing stem cells in Mexico rather than doing them here in the office. But, when it comes closer to that time, we'll maybe discuss, which option is better. So I kind of always had in the back of my mind that I might need to go to Mexico to do stem cells. But I personally had never traveled to Mexico. I didn't really have Mexico on my bucket list of a place that I wanted to travel to. And I was a little nervous. I thought, oh boy, I don't know about that. But he sent me a whole video thing of him talking about, the differences in stem cells between the US and Mexico. And that's also something, if you want to reach out privately, I still have that video. I could share it with you. But anyhow, the gist of it is that in the US, in order for you to have stem cells, they're required to take it from your bone marrow, and then they have a processing that they do, and then they inject them into you. Whereas in Mexico, they are able to give you donor cells. So they basically take stem cells that, wait, excuse me, there, come from the umbilical cords, I think, or something. I don't know. I don't know all exactly how they get them, but they're able to get the stem cells that are donor stem cells, and they're able to produce them in a much larger quantity. So here in the US, when they get those stem cells from your bone marrow, it's, maybe a few thousand or whatever stem cells, but when they do them in Mexico, it's in the millions as far as the number of stem cells. So they're able to obtain a lot more of those stem cells. And so as a result, it can end up being significantly more effective. And so not only are they able to get more of them, but just the process by which they're able to obtain those stem cells results in, typically for most people, it's more effective and more lasts longer over the long term, especially. And there's a lot of reasons why they can't do them that way in the US at this point. There is a lot of hope by both my orthopedic as well as several other stem cell specialists and doctors that work in stem cells that at some point they will be able to do that kind of a stem cell method in the United States. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about why they can't do them that way in the US right now, but just know that they can't. So the decision for me was, do I go out of my comfort zone and go to Mexico, do the stem cells in Mexico, knowing that the prognosis and the results will probably be better for the long term? Or do I just try to do them here at his office in Utah and, well, we'll just see how it goes? Well, I decide at the persuading of my orthopedic, because he really, really felt like I should go to Mexico. And after talking it over with my mom and being able to convince my mom to come with me to Mexico, because I didn't really want to go to Mexico alone, didn't feel like that was a great idea. My mom and I both book our flights to Mexico, and we both go down there, and she comes with me to the stem cell clinic, and I get those stem cell injections. And at first I was thinking that the stem cell injections in Mexico were going to hurt just as much as the PRP back in Utah, but they actually didn't. It actually felt, just like a typical shot, like if you're getting a vaccine or some other kind of a typical shot, just a little bit of the pick and then, goes in. And it was a really great experience. It was quick and fast and smooth. And this was about 2 months ago, as of the date of when this podcast episode is coming out. So, it hasn't been a super long time, but it's been long enough for me to start to feel the effects of the stem cells and to be able to get a sense of what my prognosis is hopefully going to be for the long term. And so let's talk a little bit about the costs. So costs for stem cells vary widely, both in the US and in Mexico. And at his clinic in Utah specifically, currently, it's around $6,000 to $7,000 for stem cells, and that basically covers the process and anywhere they need to put them. So they could do them in your knees, your hip, and your back, and it would cost about the same. In Mexico, currently, the way the pricing works at the clinic that he works with is that it's $2,400 per spot and injection. So for me, it was $4,800 to do both knees. So, cost-wise, on the surface, it was a little bit cheaper, but then I also had to pay $900 for a flight because I went down to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, and flights from Salt Lake City to Puerto Vallarta are not super cheap. I did go on Memorial Day weekend, but, I had looked at flights at other times and they were still just as expensive. So anyhow, and then pay for hotels, food, all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, because my mom came with me, we had those expenses as well. So ultimately, if anything, it ended up costing a little bit more expensive to do them in Mexico. So a lot of people, when they find out I went to Mexico for stem cells, they'll be like, oh, you went there because it was cheaper. Well, actually, it wasn't really cheaper. And in fact, if anything, like I just mentioned, it was a little bit more expensive. So that's something to keep in mind. I really went there because I feel like the long-term prognosis will be better. So what were the results? Well, I tell you, I started feeling different and feeling a difference immediately. The week or a couple weeks even up till right before I had gone to Mexico and done the stem cells, I was back not quite to square one before my surgery. I didn't need a walker to walk, and I could sit down on the toilet and still get up, but I was starting to really relapse as far as like a lot of clicking from like the arthritis in my knees, a lot of pain, having a harder time with exercise, and I was really starting to head downhill, and it was really starting to become really tough as far as the pain and everything goes. And I noticed pretty much an immediate difference. I started having less pain within 24 hours, I would say. That said, the healing process is that for about 6 to 7 weeks afterwards, you do have to go to a physical therapy office and do some kind of a therapy machine with it's like what's called a shockwave therapy machine. And I'm to the point now that as of this recording coming out, it's been about 2 weeks since my last physical therapy appointment. So, I'm through that process as well now at this point. And they say it can take up to about 6 weeks for you to really start feeling the full effect, but then the stem cells can continue to even work in your body for several months after that. And I have to say that now, about 2 months out, I am really feeling a lot better than I used to. I am starting to sleep a lot better at night. I am able to go on much longer walks. I can go in the pool and go swimming and not hurt. I wake up in the morning and I don't have the creaking and the tenseness and the soreness in my knees that I used to have in the morning all the time. I'm able to do quite a few squats. I can even get down on the ground and kneel without pain. And so I would have to say that it's really going really, really well right now. Now, is it going perfect? Maybe not totally perfect. If I do sit still for too long, or if I move the wrong way, or something like that, maybe after extensive exercise of more than 30 minutes or something like that, I do still get maybe a little bit of soreness in the knees, a little bit of tension, that kind of thing, but it is nowhere close to what it used to be. In fact, I would say that progress wise, I'm probably back to the way things were 8 to 10 years ago. When I would occasionally get a little bit of pain and then just put a little bit of some kind of an oil or cream on it to help with it, but it is nothing like it used to be. So I feel super blessed. I feel super optimistic, super grateful to my orthopedic and for his knowledge and expertise in stem cells and in surgery and in all of the things that I've been through the last 2.5 years. I feel very grateful to have known him and to have had that connection and to have been able to experience the kind of healing that I have experienced. I know that I'm super fortunate and that a lot of people aren't that blessed, but I look forward to a good long future with hopefully not a lot of knee pain. I am still, going to be doing the stationary bike, the swimming at least a couple times a week, a lot of the squats and the other knee exercises to make sure that I continue to strengthen my knees and to strengthen my legs and continue to work on, really having good, healthy knees. And so a couple of things that I have learned is that having good, strong, healthy, pain-free knees is a process. It's something you really have to work at. It's not something you can just expect to have overnight or whatever. And the more you work on it, the more you will have success and you will have less pain. And that a lot of that is up to me. Now, as far as the long-term results go, do I know for a fact that I'll never, ever in my entire life have to do knee replacements? No. And do I know that I'll never, ever have to go do stem cells again? No. But, for now, I feel really blessed. And yes, I am actually really glad ultimately that I did do the surgery as well a couple years ago, because I feel like that was able to help start the healing. It was able to help me clean out. He was able to help fix a few things before I went in and did the stem cells and the PRP. So I feel like it's all been a process. I feel like the exact routine and process that I went through was really perfect for me. Now, it may not be perfect for you. That's why, the doctors exist to give evaluations and things like that for people. And I do have to say that based on the results with stem cells, that in the future, if I were to start having problems again, I would very likely go straight to stem cells again rather than doing knee replacements. Now, a couple things, however, for you to think about, if you are facing a lot of chronic knee pain, and this is really some things that you really want to think about when you're talking to an orthopedic, when you're even looking for an orthopedic, things like that, is knee replacements can be more dangerous than a lot of people are led to believe. And I have learned this, over the last couple of years, even talking to my orthopedic who used to do a lot of knee replacements. And he actually no longer does actual knee replacements. He actually just does regular surgeries, and then, he refers them out if somebody really, really has to have one. Is that knee replacements last in people an average of about 20 years. So currently, when I had my surgery, I was not quite 45. And as of the date of this recording, I'm now 47. So, based on my average life expectancy, I would probably have to do them at least twice if I did them now. So you really don't want to do knee replacements before your 60s if, in fact, you decide that's really something you need to do. So if you're a younger person listening to this, you really want to try to do what you can to avoid them, especially. And then I've also learned that, if you're already bone on bone, or if your damage and progression is past a certain point, you may not be able to do stem cells and find them to be effective. So that's one of the reasons you really want to get help sooner rather than later. And then I've also learned to know that I'm a stronger person than I thought I was. I can handle a lot of more pain than I thought I could. I can overcome things. I can push myself. I can make myself do a lot of exercises that I thought I couldn't. And ultimately, I have to say I have learned a lot from this experience. And, if I could go back in time, would I really choose to have all this pain and all this stuff? No, I probably wouldn't. But in a lot of ways, I am grateful for the experience. I feel like it's taught me a lot, and it's helped me have a lot more sympathy for people who really struggle with their knees and with walking and things like that, and for being able to help others to overcome these challenges as well. So, like I said, wanted to share this in this episode. Hopefully, you found this episode to be helpful. And if you do want my doctor's information, or if you are in need of some help, would like to talk with me about some of the more specific exercises, other solutions, things that I have done and gone through in order to help heal my knee pain, my door is always open, and I'm willing to chat, and the information on how to connect with me and find a time will be in the show notes. So thank you again. Thanks for listening. And this has been another episode of the Autoimmune Rehab Podcast, sharing my story of how I went to Mexico for stem cells and some of the reasons behind that. And if you have found this episode to be helpful with others, please share with others so that they can benefit and learn from it. And take care and have a great rest of your day. And I will be sharing with you soon next week again on another episode of the Autoimmune Rehab Podcast.